Chapter 11. A wonderful feeling. Monsters and artifacts found in dungeons can be categorized into 7 grades. The first grade is the highest and the 7th the lowest. The monsters released into the wilderness are in the 7th grade, the lowest, and something an average force user should handle. But not all of the children are average, most are below it. The team that Zephyr put together has ambushed some monsters. They would corner, turn, and then chase them to a clearing where Zephyr would be waiting, so that Zephyr could kill them and show his power. And to be honest, Zephyr's skills are just as impressive as his sister's. He also has the Force Slash, and his speed cannot be compared to any of his children. Vacuse acknowledged that as he strode into the clearing and saw Zephyr atop a pile of monsters' corpses. His new subordinates surrounded him with praises. In his past life, Severin was chased by a monster into the clearing, but this time, he walked in with his own legs. Zephyr saw him as well, and the smug look on his face was instantly wiped away, to be replaced by something else, hatred and anger. "You fucking bastard, I'm glad you walked in with your own legs. I've been meaning to go after you before." Vacuse nodded, his hand on his sword. "Then it is good we're meeting now." Zephyr jumped down, and his 20 subordinates surrounded him as he walked forward. "You think you're something special because father let you eat at our table. You think you can make fun of me, you filthy animal." Vacuse did not say anything. He simply stood there and watched, again marveling at how pathetic he truly was in his previous life. He had cowered and begged for his life, rolling on the dirt just to save his life. Zephyr got angry that Vacuse did not say anything and only watched with indifference. "You think you're something. I'm going to kill you. But I'll make it slow. I'll take your hand first, and then I will kill you slowly throughout the rest of your life. I'll let you watch as I climb up." Vacuse blinked. "This is new. Your show are always creative when it comes to inflicting pain. Get him. Hold him down. I want his right hand." "I suppose I should be glad you took my left hand the last time," Vacuse mumbled, and his hand went to his sword. 5 of the children rushed forward, their weapons raised and the little force they could use glowing on their bodies. Vacuse drew his sword and carved it with force even greater than the one he used when fighting Lyra. He swung it. The slash that came out was like a whip, a twisting snake that hit the 5 children at once, right on the neck, taking the burden of their heads from them. Vacuse grinned. "Curious how I haven't stained my sword with blood. I should remedy that." 5 bodies hit the ground with a thud, their heads later, still filled with shock and surprise. Blood pooled quickly beneath them, soaking into the hungry ground and adding to the thickness in the air. Zephyr was shocked. In his short life, he was the strongest in his set. He even believed he was stronger than his sister. Nobody in his age bracket could threaten him, and he saw the way his father looked at him, the hope of the family. Nobody should be stronger than him, much less a bastard. He shook his head in denial. "No, it is impossible. A trick. I'm the hope, the dragon child." Vacuse yawned. "See my red eyes. We're all the dragon child. You're not special. You're just full of shit. Well, are you guys going to attack me? Very well, I'll come to you." Vacuse leaped forward so fast he left a faint blue wind of his shape behind. He jumped into the midst of the remaining subordinates, and his sword danced. They tried to fight back, but Severin was like some eel monster covered by the force. He was faster and stronger, and he knew just where to hit. Swung under the sword here, his own sword already passing through the armpit to the heart before he ripped it free. Make the force appear just above the sword, giving it an extended reach that fooled them into thinking they had given him enough space. He carved flesh like soft wood, used blood as his paint. Screams erupted, blood-stopping screams of finality and helplessness. He had almost killed all of them before the rest realized that it was not a fight. It was a slaughter, a one-sided slaughter. The rest turned their backs and ran, but 3 force slashes suddenly lit up the air and hit them like an arrow, burning into their flesh and snapping their spines. Drip, drip, drip. Blood fell from his sword and turned his white robe red, with his eyes painted with the same color. Vacuse turned to Zephyr. "It's your turn now." Zephyr gripped his sword with a sweat-covered palm, and he shook. He had met someone much stronger than him. But how? Vacuse shrugged. "I do not know as well. But thank you for playing your part. You made a good stepping stone, you should be glad." Zephyr held his sword even tighter. Surely we can talk through this. We are both equals, right? We are both sons of the dragon. We are both strong. See, I will even denounce myself from the throne. We can be reasonable. Vacuse frowned. We are both strong. You're right. I think we can do that. Leave the throne for me and be my sidekick in the future. Zephyr sagged in relief so hard he almost dropped to the ground. His body unclenched, and he smiled. He swallowed. Thank you. Vacuse nodded. It's all right. I mean, I forgive you. You were a child and all that for cutting my hand. But unfortunately, I still cannot forgive the betrayal. What are you talking about? But you said. Vacuse smiled. I just gave you hope so I can enjoy the despair on your face later. You bloody monster. His sword raised for his fourth slash. Vacuse was already on the move. His sword pushed forward and stabbed into the hilt of Zephyr's sword, stopping it from swinging. His left hand shot forward and dug into his opponent's left eye as he ripped it off, breaking the bones beneath as well. Zephyr screamed and dropped his sword, his two hands going to his eyes. Vacuse stepped forward, and his sword lit up, the edge covered in blue energy that emitted a shimmer. His sword flashed up, and he cut Zephyr at the neck angle, together with his wrist. Vacuse crouched to pick up the head, and he smiled. He felt as if a lighter weight had been removed from his shoulder. Not only that, he felt a rush as he stood in the carnage that he created. The power to determine others' fate, to drive his own fate as he wanted. Vacuse wanted more. What a wonderful feeling. Then he lifted the head into the sky as if showing someone. Thank you for reading, guys. Won't you give the poor author power stones? Let me know you are reading. Chapter 12, Construct. The arena was completely silent, so silent that everyone seemed to be holding their breath as they turned to Drenver on his throne. The man leaned forward, his hands gripping the chair handles so hard the metal began to twist and warp. His eyes were solely on the projection in the middle and the head of Zephyr lifted in the air, a clear challenge. Different emotions appeared on his face, curiosity and joy mixed with a little pity. Is this the real child of the dragon? It was only then that the lords and nobles breathed a sigh. They had never seen or heard of a case where a bastard won and killed a legitimate Vorrakyn before. In just minutes, Vacuse had suppressed one and killed one. He had shown himself to be the stronger one. Below, Azalda blinked slowly. She did not show much emotion at first, but when many people looked her way, she bowed her head and forced water from her eyes. My son. Her tone was flat and clipped. Just like that, Zephyr was treated as if he never existed. All the nobles who had supported him quietly re-strategized. It seemed there was a new heir. With Zephyr taken care of, Vacuse turned his attention to his main objective, the blood fruits. He faced the pile of monsters and used his sword to cut them up, using their blood to rub on his body. Then, with the smell of other monsters on him, he sped into the forest. At that moment, no one could possibly face him in the forest, not even the monsters. He was the biggest threat. But he did not want any disturbance on his way, so he disguised himself. Normally, monsters might want to attack and eat other monsters, but with the children in the forest, they had something easier to eat. So they avoided each other as best they could. Thus, Vacuse made his way across without any issues, and soon he reached the center where the blood fruits lay. It was a gigantic tree of hard redness with branches like bloody swords and leaves like gems. Vacuse stared at it as he slowly entered the clearing. Wow, he could not help it. It was a majestic thing, so big that 30 adults would not be able to wrap their hands around it if they stood in a circle. The fruits were like shrunken heads. There were 8 of them. Vacuse smiled. Even with the way the fruits looked, all bloody, he still swallowed with hunger. This time, I am going to eat the feast. Activate the construct, set it at level 2, Drenver said. Your Grace. Level 2. That is strong. He might not be able to withstand something like that, and Drenver raised his hand. Do as you are told. Although there was an outpost and shield to protect the blood fruits, there was still a treasure left behind, a construct made when the Vorrakyn were at the height of their powers. The construct was always set at the highest level and left to guard the blood tree, but for the right, they had left it off. But now, the family head wanted it activated. Drenver's hands tightened. Although he looked calm on the sore face, Inside he was shaking from the gamble he was about to make. Vacuse had shown that he had the highest potential, more than the children he thought carried the family's hope. Yet he had detected something in the way Vacuse lifted Zephyr's head. Arrogance. Drenver needed him to be humbled. And he wanted to see just how powerful he was. Vacuse was focused on the tree, so he almost did not notice something blurring toward him at incredible speed. But his reaction time was not bad, and his sword moved up, his body twisting to the side. Bang! He slapped the arrow away, and at the same time, he was gone from the line of sight. "Who is there? Show yourself," he shouted, crouching and slowly retreating into the forest. "Nobody should have reached here before me." Then what could it be? He got his answer seconds later as something lifted from the roots of the tree. The thing was red in color as well, which was why he had not seen it at first. A construct. Vacuse's eyes widened. An old one. He had seen constructs before. Old houses like the Vorrakyn usually had some. They were terrifying weapons. The construct made a cracking sound as it moved forward, as if its joints had long been left unused. It was humanoid with oversized hands and a hunched back, and its head was in the shape of a dragon. Vacuse hissed. Drenver. Only the family head could pull something like this off. Just what was that bastard trying to do again? Panic almost set in, but he had been in many dangerous situations in his past life, and Vacuse soon realized staying calm increased the chances of staying alive. With his perception, he felt out the construct and breathed a sigh. "It seems the level is lower, or else I would already be dead." Since there was nothing he could do, he needed the fruits, and something stood between him and what he wanted. That meant there was only one thing he could do. Vacuse straightened and came out into the clearing once more, his sword covered in a faint blue light. "I have never truly fought one of these constructs before. Let us see how that will go." The construct slowly approached. It lifted its right hand and fired a red arrow. Time seemed to slow. Vacuse raised his sword to block the arrow, and it was then that the construct made its move. The arrow had been a distraction. Vacuse saw a red blur in the left corner of his eye. Chapter 13. Construct. His mind screamed at him. Dodge. Twist. Roll. His sword was already deflecting the arrow, but his left side was left wide open, a sword already in the construct's hand, aiming for his ribs. One of the advantages of being weak that Vacuse could mention was that it forces one to be creative, those who want to stay alive. A burst of force from his legs sent him shooting up, a blazing sword passing through where he once was. Midair, he twisted and sent a force slash downward. The construct jumped away, its own sword cutting upward, and the two met with a hard clanging sound. "You are tough," Vacuse muttered as he reached the ground again, barely noticing the jarring in his bones. Of course, the construct didn't reply, but the murderous intent flowing from it seemed to sharpen. It bent a little, its grip on its sword loosening. Vacuse recognized the technique immediately, and his own body reacted instinctively. He slashed his sword sideways, releasing the force energy like a whip. At the same time, the construct did the same. Crack. The two attacks snapped in the air, red and blue, and collided in a burst of rippling shockwave. But even then, immediately after the two released their attacks, they were already on the move, as if they planned it. Vacuse bent his body and darted beneath the shockwave above him, and the construct did the same. The two collided, sword against sword, sparks flying. Vacuse felt the painful vibration deep in his bones and knew he couldn't match the construct in strength. His body was simply too weak and soft to keep up. He gritted his teeth as he was pushed back effortlessly. "Fuck, I forgot I'm still a kid. The physical difference can't be compared. I can only beat it with force energy." Vacuse's eyes scanned the construct's body fruitlessly. He was searching for its weak points, almost forgetting that the construct isn't a training one. They are made for killing and could only be turned off by the main control, which was at the outpost. Vacuse jumped back from it. "The worst thing is, it will begin to adjust, knowing my weaknesses while its intellect increases." Vacuse didn't even notice he was smiling, his eyes shining and his blood shimmering. He was enjoying it, to fight something and not immediately think he was going to die, to actually fight and not try to survive. It was something he never experienced in his past life. The construct seemed to have known their strength difference because its grip on the sword tightened, and it held it more forcefully. Vacuse grinned. Bastard is going to try and end it. Just as he suspected, the construct leaped, its steps so powerful it left dents on the ground as it covered the distance between them in blinking strides and was almost immediately in front of Vacuse. He watched it come at him, his face gaining a look of concentration. Time seemed to slow as all his nerves came alive, his heart beating fast and his blood rushing. He took a deep breath and sucked all the force around him in. All the blue glow that surrounded him disappeared. His eyes shone, and he folded his left hand behind him. When his left hand was cut, he lost his balance and had to start training all over again. It wasn't easy. He struck with his hand hundreds of thousands of times. He knew he was a weakling, and his only chance of survival was honing the few skills that he had. One of them was sword. He wasn't talented in it, but he was talented in working hard. As the construct covered the distance between them, his body came alive, and his eyes blazed with all the force he was holding in. One chance, that's all he has. Whoosh! The arrival of the construct came with a blast of wind, and its sword came down with overwhelming power. Vacuse's body twisted, his legs were his new balance, and he moved as if he was drunk, as if he was atop a stormy ship. He didn't dodge the sword just like it. He avoided it by inches. It was a technique that was developed solely by him. It requires precise coordination, balance that couldn't be achieved easily, and sharp eyesight. The difference in avoiding was so small that it fooled opponents into thinking they've already killed him. That's when he would strike. His sword blazed. Blue rippling energy erupted from his weapon, a shimmer that covered his whole weapon. He attacked, his sword moving like quicksilver. Not at the construct's head or body, but directly at the hand that held the sword. Ping! All the force in his sword struck the hand so hard that the construct's sword flew out of its hand, and the hand was twisted to the side. Vacuse then turned and ran. With the little energy he had left, he shot himself forward, his small frame rushing to the tree. He had thought about it. There was no way for him to beat the construct. So the only option was to get to the tree. The construct saw that and shot after him. Its speed seemed to have increased. It leaped, hands outstretched, and was about to touch Vacuse's neck when he suddenly fell forward in a roll, his sword discarded. The hand missed him by inches, but now the construct was looming over him. Vacuse grinned at it. I'm already at the tree. His left hand was stretched forward, touching the bits of roots that jutted out of the ground. Immediately, the construct saw that it turned away from him, went to pick up its sword, and this appeared between the roots. Vacuse flopped down and breathed hard, excitement flowing through him. How will it be like when I become a soul bearer? In his small way, Vacuse had tasted power. And he wanted more. He lifted himself to pick up his sword and turned to the tree. All that running around is making me hungry. By that time, the sun was already setting, and the forest was getting dark. Chapter 14. Another way to look at things. The first thing Vacuse did was harvest all 8 fruits and arrange them in front of him, and then he began to eat. The first taste of it was something Vacuse couldn't accurately describe. The blood fruits tasted sweet and bitter with a sharpness he couldn't put his hand on. He ate 2 of them immediately. Isn't this supposed to work and expand my soul space somehow? He sat there cross-legged with the fruits in front of him, contemplating what he might have done wrong since it was the first time he was eating them in both lives. Maybe I'm missing something. Or suddenly, a fire pit opened up inside him, and lightning replaced his blood. He jerked as all his muscles locked up. His paws seemed to be opened as light poured out from his body. His eyes blazed. Energy overflowed his body, condensing inside him and forming into a core that developed into his soul space. Sweat ran down his body like water. This is incredible. Vacuse shouted, and then he ate more of the fruits, swallowing one in a single bite, and he was eating another one when someone staggered into the clearing. So, you're here already, Vacuse, Lyra said. Her white robe was covered in blood, and she was limping, her sword still dripping as she dragged it across. The construct didn't attack her. Vacuse nodded and continued to eat his fruit. He ignored her. The fruit slid down his throat, and soon a burst of energy happened around him again. He'd eaten 4 blood fruits now. He sighed and picked up another one. You know, the more you eat, the less effect it will have on your body. Vacuse blinked as he munched on another one. Is that true? He didn't know anything about that. It's not like the Vorrakyn shared the secret of the blood fruits with the bastards. And now that he thought about it, if the blood fruits worked in accordance with how much was eaten, then Drenver would have devoured the whole tree during his time and bound a dragon. Maybe. It is not like soul space is the only thing needed to bind a beast. Soul space is something a person is born with, and it can only be expanded little by little through the years. So those who are born with a small soul space are already low on the food chain. Vacuse shrugged. If I eat everything, then it'll still help a little. Right. Lyra twitched. Right, but you shouldn't. You should give me one. Vacuse looked at her. I don't see any reason to give you one of my blood fruits. She took a deep breath and smiled bitterly. I saw my brother's body. And, do you want to avenge him, or do you want to guilt trip me into giving you a fruit? Which one will it be? Her face showed surprise, and then it went calm. Vacuse watched her and couldn't read any expression on her face. Just 6 years old, and she was already plotting. No wonder she was a big mover in the future. She bowed her head. I can't manipulate you like my brother. So how's this? I will deal with you in truth only and be your ally. You want to be the Dragon Lord, right? The family head. I am smart, intelligent. I understand that I won't be able to defeat and oppose you. You are stronger than me. So make use of me. Vacuse watched her silently. He didn't trust her, not at all, but she was intriguing. Even in his past life, Vacuse regarded her as one of the only reasonable Vorrakyn. She understood her place, but that doesn't mean she won't reach far above it in the future. Vacuse played with the 3 fruits and asked a question in return. What do you want? Vacuse didn't trust those who do not want something in return. They are the most deadly. The Vorrakyns, father thinks that we need overwhelming power to claim our place in the empire, but I disagree. We need those who can think and maneuver politics. We are declining because we focus only on brute strength, and when the empire shifted from its warring era, we were left behind. Vacuse raised his brows. That's a perspective he'd never thought about before. He was interested. After all, one of his goals was to raise the Vorrakyn's house. He picked up an apple and raised it to her. Give me one strategy, a plan, something you would have done right now if you were the family head. Her eyes glowed. She didn't look like a 6-year-old at all, more like a learned scholar. End squabbles with the barbarians and start exporting deeper west. Form a company to provide safe passage through the wilderness. Vacuse smiled. Well, I wasn't expecting that. You will be useful, Lyra Vorrakyn, so I will invest in you. He threw her a fruit. Just don't forget to live. The end is always full of regrets. She opened her mouth, probably to question him about his quick change of subject. But just then, something whooshed through the air, a cutting sound that was familiar. Someone was throwing a weapon. Lyra dodged to the side, but her limp got in the way, and she couldn't move fast enough. A sword that shot like an arrow slammed into her left shoulder with a solid twang. She was thrown forward with a painful scream on her lips, the fruit in her hands falling to the ground. Vacuse raised his head. Now, that's a familiar sound. Lyra struggled to flip herself over, tears running down her cheeks and her body shuddering from the pain, but her right hand went to the fruit, and she began to eat, using it as a scream stopper. Children of dragons. Vicious children. A boy came into the clearing. He carried up to 8 swords with him. The weight didn't seem to hold him down at all as he dragged them with a strip of torn cloth. Behind him, more children also appeared. Red eyes glowing everywhere. Chapter 15. Tools and subordinates. Harkon, Vacuse said. The boy was a big boy with limbs far for his age, his eyes narrowed on Lyra. Don't eat that. His right hand came down and he took one of the swords. He lifted it, his shoulder flexing, and then with no apparent show of strength he threw it. Whoosh! Clang! The sword shot forward like an arrow, blurring so fast it seemed to disappear. Lyra tried to jump away, but it was useless. Her shoulder and wounded leg got in her way. The sword aimed for her head, but suddenly another sword appeared and slapped it away casually. Harkon, Vacuse repeated. This girl is now my instrument. Do you want to kill her? Harkon stared at him. How do you know my name? Harkon of the Flaming Swords. Vacuse knew of him in his past life. He was also a genius in the family's new standard. At such a young age, he had already created a personal technique with the force where he could able to concentrate all his energy in a single hand and use it to throw weapons at an incredible speed. When he grew up, the beast he bound with granted him the power of elemental fire, and each of the swords he threw caused a massive explosion. He also had a weird fascination with swords, that was why he didn't use proper throwing weapons like the spear. Vacuse didn't have anything against him. They had barely interacted in his past life as Harkon was stationed at an outpost. It doesn't matter. Answer my question. Do you want to kill her? Vacuse asked again. Harkon stared at the tree. There were no more fruits and then he stared at Vacuse. Share your fruit and I won't kill her. Vacuse frowned and weighed it. He didn't really have any more use for the fruits and he had already marked Lyra as his tool for the future. He looked down at her and she stared back at him, her face calm and clear, the fruit already consumed. Vacuse yanked the sword from her shoulder so unexpectedly and then he turned to Harkon. How do you do that again? Let's see. You move the force inside of your hand and then coil it inside your muscles. With his increase in soul space and force in his new life and the hard work he did in his past life to manage every little energy he had for fighting, Vacuse already had perfect control of his force. He turned his hand backwards, the bloody sword pointing back and then he shoved it. Bam! An intense energy shot out of his hand with a blast of wind. The sword was faster than an arrow as it flew and slammed into the head of a girl who was reaching for one of the two remaining fruits. I guess that's how you did it, Vacuse nodded to himself. Harkon paused. He looked at where the girl was crumpled, her sword pulling on the fruits. He shook his head. I am not trying to kill her. You seem like a thick head but you still have some brains. You caused the wound so you should dress it. Is the girl part of your team? He shook his head as he tore strips out of his robe. She's not, but the remaining survivors have had turned into two teams. One with me and the other one with another team. I think they have moved around to the back. Vacuse returned to his fruits. They were covered in blood and he cleaned them on the clothes of the dead girl. Tell me, who is the one leading the second team? Vacuse Vorrakyn. Vacuse went very still. Vacuse Vorrakyn. Known as the deadliest Vorrakyn during their time, he was Drenvar's shadow. His assassin. And he was good at his job. Not only was he skillful in the art of assassination, the beast of the Dragonkin that he bound was a very rare one. Not powerful but rare and one that complemented Kajaru's skill. Vacuse grinned. Kajaru. Good. He turned and faced the place where Kajaru was hiding. I have the fruit, Kajaru. If you want them, come before me. Don't even think of hiding and striking from the back. The clearing became silent immediately and then the bush rustled and a boy came out. He held a broken sword, the perfect length for a dagger and he walked with soundless steps. Kajaru, Vacuse said. A pale face with big black eyes stared at him, slight frame, suspicion focused on him. How do you know about me? You said stabbing in the back and this is the first time I am seeing you. Vacuse shrugged. Does it matter? You want these fruits, don't you? Harkon and Kajaru. They didn't answer, it was apparent. It was all they needed. Vacuse went straight to the point. The two of them were skilled and he wanted to use them. I want you as my subordinates. That's my price for the fruits. The three of them stood there. Kajaru and Harkon stared at each other. It was the first time they would be meeting each other and yet they gave Vacuse the same expression as if he was out of his mind or stupid. Vacuse could read what was on their minds. They thought he was bluffing or that the future was too uncertain and besides, aren't they all subordinates to Drenvar? Kajaru shrugged. Sure, why not? Harkon also nodded. Vacuse threw them the fruits. Don't die because I will come and collect my promise in the future. They didn't reply as they hurriedly ate the fruits. The other children looked at them with envy and bitterness. Vacuse stared at the red tree. The first rite and his first act of vengeance had come to an end, and he'd also gotten some useful tools for his efforts. He stretched. Now, it is time to catch a dragon. Chapter 16. And you are. It didn't take long after that for them to come and pack the children back to the arena. Of all the over 200, those that remained were not up to 30. Those who were injured were treated, and they were given food. Normally, Drenver would turn the rest of it into a party, but the man had been cloaked with a strange silence since the children returned. The big projection that dominated half of the arena sky showed the rankings of the children. The rankings were based on their overall performance. Vacuse was put at number 1, and the next rank began at number 5 with Harkon, followed by Kajaru and then Lyra. The rest remained unranked. I guess I didn't do too badly, Vacuse said. Before, he wasn't even ranked, and it was the first time in his life he would be number 1 on a list. It made him feel something he had never felt before. Satisfaction. Combined with his earlier revenge, he was feeling absolute satisfaction. Vacuse sat there in the chair arranged for them, facing the guests who stared at them. All of them waiting for what Drenver would say. Eyes drilled into Vacuse from all angles. After all, it was safe to say that he would be the heir of Vorrakyn now. Finally, Drenver stood from his throne, and his eyes swept the gathering. A hush fell, and he began to speak. Once, the wings of our dragons spread so far they shielded the empire alone. Our roar was strong enough to shake the continent, and our soulbearers were the apex. Slight disgust crawled onto his face, and his expression twisted. Vacuse was familiar with that expression. If there was one thing he inherited from Drenver, then it was the ability to switch from calmness to extreme anger in an instant. But now we are at the bottom. Our lands are taken, and the title our ancestors fought for, is being threatened. We were the sky, and we once held the heavens in bondage. His expression smoothed again. I, Drenver Vorrakyn, Grand Duke and Dragon Lord, will return us to where we were standing. And above that, his eyes went to Vacuse as he said the last part, and he met his father's eyes unflinchingly. 2 pairs of red eyes. Different thoughts but the same meaning. The father thought he had found a new tool, and the son was thinking about how it would feel to have his father's head in his hand. I won't let you drag the name of the Vorrakyn through the mud again. I will personally take charge of things. Single quote. Drenver didn't even look at Lyra as he continued. The Bloodheart rite has come to an end. Now, we will start preparing for the second part. He said it as if the second part would happen the same day or the next day. Or the same year. The second rite was where they would use the dragon pathway to try and bind themselves to a dragon or, as in most cases lately, its skin. But it was not that easy. Now that the blood rite was over, the children would begin their next ordeal of training. Now, they had been recognized somewhat as a Vorrakyn. Each of the children would be studied, and then they would train them specifically in line with what fit them. In his past life, it was realized that Vacuse was only good at one thing, doing things again and again. So they first trained him as a soldier, an ordinary one who was good for taking hits and probing enemies. He was good at running too, and they used him as bait after they had him trained to run again and again, running without getting eaten by a monster. People like Kajaru were trained as assassins. And then there was the general training where they would teach politics and geography, the pathways of the other houses and organizations, and the continent. They would teach them how to ride a dragon and how to fight on a dragon. Just in case. And how to use their powers, how to use techniques, and so on. One thing the Vorrakyn did not slack on was training. They were a warrior family, after all. The culling has ended. Those who remain will be further culled through the years. Drenver spread his hands. Children of the dragons, I wish you luck. Drenver did not pay any outward special attention to Vacuse as he turned and began to walk away. Vacuse smiled. The game had begun. Brother Vacuse. Vacuse turned and saw Lyra beside him. He raised his brows. Her shoulder had been further dressed, and her face had lost its pale look. She smiled at the raised brows coming from Vacuse. Well, I'm sure father is going to adopt you to replace Zephyr. It's only a matter of time. Also, thank you for earlier. It's convenient, Vacuse shrugged. Lyra nodded. Well, I'm going. I hope we meet under much better conditions. You are going to like this outpost. Vacuse blinked until he remembered that the children would be sent to different outposts until they were ready for the pathways rites. He looked up at the projection and saw that his name was marked for the Bloodheart outpost. So Drenver was indeed paying attention. This outpost is one of the strongest and most valuable to put me here. One by one, all the children were taken. He saw Kajaru and Harkon leave without saying any other words to him, but Vacuse didn't mind. When he was ready to use them, he would seek them out. His only fear was that they should not be dead by then. So you are the prodigy, eh? You Vorrakyn just like to think you are the best or something. Vacuse turned around, and there in front of him was standing the typical, classic young son of a lord with an inflated ego. Single quote. I don't want to deal with bullshit like this. He turned to the boy, his gaze sharpened. And you are. Chapter 17. Young Master. The boy who spoke was one of the lesser nobility who was there during the rite. He was also one of those left behind to learn from the outpost until they are ready for the second rite. He did not come alone. Behind him were 3 more of the children, and they glared at Vacuse with heated eyes. Far from them were more children who were left behind, all of them watching. Unlike the boy, they seemed to be even lower in the nobility rank. The lead boy stepped forward and pointed his finger, almost going as far as to try to poke him in the eyes, but Vacuse caught the hand firmly in his grasp. He sighed. Vacuse could fight anyone all day, but he really did not see the point in fighting those who were so grossly weaker than him, and when he was the weaker person, he did not go around provoking either. It was stupid and could get him killed. Why could not everyone just understand that? The boy struggled to pull his finger away, his cheeks puffing hauntingly. Do you know who I am? Vacuse's eyes turned to the left where the knights of the outpost stood watching. They did not make any moves. They had seen it happen again and again. Even though they were kids, they would still try to prove their dominance and know each other's place. It was also better for the knights because they would not have to always break up fights. This was exactly why Vacuse was baffled. Why did they think he needed to fight with them to show his place? He looked at the boy and then at the others behind him. His hand tightened into a crushing grip. Which of my behaviors or appearance shows weakness? Tell me now so I can cut it off. The boy's expression slowly began to turn into fear and pain. He made small whimpering sounds and tried to frantically get away, but Vacuse held tight. You are only a bastard. You might be a Vorrakyn, but you are a bastard. First. Vacuse smiled, and it chilled the boy into silence. You are right. I am only a bastard, and it is a fact that I have never argued with anyone. But what does it matter? I am a bastard who is stronger than you. With a sharp movement, he snapped the finger in his grip, the bones cracking like a twig. The boy screamed, and hot tears fell from his eyes as he fell, crawling to get away. Vacuse's eyes narrowed on the others. He is not smart enough to come up with this. Someone must have inflated his ego and tried to test me out. A very stupid thing. One of the boys stepped forward. He had intense eyes and a smile that lit up his face. My lord, I am. Vacuse was immediately in front of the boy, his body leaving a trail of blue shadows behind with his incredible speed. The other boy startled and moved back, but Vacuse's hand snapped out and caught him gently on the neck. You put him up to this. The boy's eyes widened as he realized that things were not going his way at all. He stammered, it was a mistake, only a test. Vacuse's smile was vicious. A test. Do you fancy yourself as a little plotter, eh? You want to test your future lord. What gave you the courage? I am really interested. Say something sensible, and I will not hurt you too much. The surroundings suddenly turned heavy and tense. Fear made the rest of the children take hurried steps back. The boy's eyes widened with doom as he felt the truth in Vacuse's voice. My name is Hush. You are not worthy enough for me to know your name. Do not sully my ears, boy. His voice was cold and harsh, devoid of anything that might make it childlike. Even the knights who were slowly creeping forward in sheer surprise showed stunned expressions on their faces. They had never seen such arrogance mixed with a chilling presence like that before. And from a child of 6. Was this the true nature of a Vorrakyn? Sweat covered the boy's face, and he began to shiver. I was only joking. Yes, it was a play, all. A joke. Vacuse snorted coldly. He dropped his hand from the boy's neck, his right hand still covered in blue energy. Then, without warning, he slapped the boy. Ta! The sound of flesh on flesh was dull, but the impact was not. The boy flew back, blood and teeth flying in the air as he fell, unmoving but breathing. The bones of his jaw seemed odd, dislocated. Vacuse frowned. I give you the mercy of living for more years. Use it wisely, and you might not die by my hand. If you are weak, stay away from those who are strong. It will save your life. For some time, it had saved Vacuse's life until those who were much stronger than him decided he needed to die. He turned away from them and strode toward the knights. He bowed to them. Then he waited patiently. One of them cleared his throat and stepped forward. Cadet Vacuse, what did you just do? Explain yourself. Vacuse stared up at them and blinked. I only defended myself. It is not prohibited here, right? I apologize if it is. Do not do it again. Vacuse shook his head. If they stay out of my way, then naturally there will not be any conflicts between us. The knight cleared his throat and appeared helpless for a while before he suddenly clapped, his eyes lighting up. Right. All of you gather up. You need to talk to the commander here and then be sorted in. That was how the knight carefully navigated the awkwardness. And that was how Vacuse, reborn and with vengeance in his heart, did his first right and dominated it. It is now time to focus on training and claiming a dragon. I will have to dominate that too. In the future. Please don't forget to send me power stones. Thank you for reading. Chapter 18. Years later Vacuse spent his childhood in training. If it could even be called that. In fact, none of the children could or should be referred to as children. They are young dragons. Their innocence had been worn out by the brutality of the world they found themselves in and the expectations placed upon them. More so for Vacuse, who had seen just how bleak the future was. The outpost's function was to defend and protect the Bloodheart Tree, which meant guarding against the monsters and the occasional orcs that came from the northernmost part of the wilderness. This provided sufficient resources for Vacuse. He threw himself into training, dedicating himself to it as he never did in his past life. His past life was spent training as bait. When he was 10, Vacuse began to spar with the knights. Of course, they didn't fight near their full power, but it was still impressive that he was able to match them on the level of force users alone. Drenver didn't once come to check up, seemingly having forgotten about him, but Vacuse knew the commander sent periodic orders back and received instructions as well. So, he was entirely surprised when, at 12, the outpost commander gave him the right to go and hunt monsters by himself. At that time, it was a known fact that only awakened monsters could hurt him. The other children envied and hated him, but Vacuse ignored their existence. Why should he concern himself with their nonsense? The gap between them couldn't be measured. To him, they barely existed. One time, when he was 15, they decided to try themselves against him once more. The difference between them had also motivated them in a way. After all, they were all warrior born, and they wanted to reach the height that he was, even if only to force him to acknowledge them. They ganged up on him and sprung an attack late at night, 8 of them. 5 ended up dead. One of them was the young master he had warned when they were 6. After that, none of them bothered him again. It became clear that the gap between them could indeed be filled with their death. When they were 17, just a year before their next rite, the focus of their training changed to more about what it means to be soul-bearers. Soul-bearers are those who can bond with beasts and gain powers through their bond. The beasts are ranked from E to SSS, and the ranks between the soul-bearers as they advance are classified differently. That sort of training bored Vacuse since he had already learned it in his last life. He used most of the time to think about how to better himself and carry out his plans for himself and Vorrakyn. When Vacuse reached 18, the Dragon Lord, Drenver Vorrakyn, summoned him to Kragthar, the grand city of the Vorrakyn. This is the last time I will be seeing you as a force user, Cadet Vacuse. The commander of the Blood Tree outpost was an old man with short hair of black and white. His red eyes carried the red of the family. They were walking past the arena that was connected to the outpost. UPGRR. A short growling roar rumbled. A dirt-brown beast walked beside them. It wasn't really walking, more like gliding and floating mixed into one. It had the head of a small dragon with red beards and wild green slitted eyes. The rest of its body was that of a serpent. Its scales shone a dull earth, and its 2 stubby hands had the power to make it float and glide with a push of them. It was a lindworm of the dragon pathway, a rank D beast. And it walking beside the commander meant that the man had reached the awakened harmonic in the advancement stage. Next time we meet, you better be a soul-bearer. Vacuse smiled faintly. He was now a tall, slender young man with a thick hood of black hair that he left unbraided or unpacked. His red eyes shone with a steady glow. His face was calm, but there was a hint of madness for those who could see it. "I will definitely match your expectations, Commander," he said as they reached the carriage that was provided for them. The carriage was large, drawn by monster flesh-eating horses. The other candidates were already sitting inside when they reached it. Vacuse stared at the carriage and the knights that followed it. His eyes scanned them briefly, and then he looked away. The commander grinned and then saluted. "My lord." He then hesitated. Although they were all bastards, it was quite clear for those who could see that Vacuse was now more than the status of his birth. Vacuse nodded at him. Through the years, the wild manner he displayed at 6 seemed to have been tamed. The commander swallowed and continued. "In the future, if you need the help of this outpost, we will certainly answer." Vacuse stared into his eyes. "I will remember this." The commander trembled in his heart. He felt just as he did when he made the bond with his beast, as if something had left him. Even then, the commander bowed. "Then I will be waiting. Best of luck, Vacuse Vorrakyn." Luck. Vacuse's hand twitched to his sword, and that hint of madness showed up again as he smiled. He shook his head and headed toward the carriage. "We'll see, Commander." The knights of the Vorrakyn barely paid him any attention as he entered the carriage and sat down. He stared at the arena and outpost where he had spent so much of his time and muttered to himself, "Now, I begin." The carriage shuddered to life as it was drawn. The horses were fast, and it moved swiftly through the forest at astonishing speed. Severin gazed outside and frowned. "Now, how will I fight those knights?" Chapter 19. Carriage. Vacuse's life in his previous one was a life filled with caution. As a weak person, he had to rely on everything to keep himself alive, like observing things and making quick calculations and choices. So when Vacuse saw the knights earlier, he noticed some things about them and knew things were not that simple. The first thing he noticed was that all the knights were a bit harried, as if they wore their clothes at the last moment. Some even had bits of leaves and splinters on them. They also had mud on their shoes, thick mud that coated them as if they had to move out of the standard road into somewhere a bit muddier. But what sent Vacuse into high alert was the concealed blood he saw on them, little splashes that were hidden. Vacuse's face tightened. They must not be from father. They must have killed the original knights that were sent, but why? Why do they want to hijack this carriage? What's so important that they have to go to such lengths? Vacuse knew the answer was him. Out of all the candidates in the carriage, he was the only one who was a bastard and likely heir of the Vorrakyn. But he still did not understand. Why me specifically? Unless you have already killed Lyra or Drenver, there is no use since the family head would just make more children. Or do they feel threatened by me and want to cut me off already? What a cruel thing to do. Vacuse smiled faintly to himself. Of course, there were different things that his death could cause depending on who was doing the killing. I need to know who is trying to kill me, Vacuse thought. Or who they want me and Vorrakyn to think is doing the killing. Vacuse's blood lit up, and his eyes glowed sharper. His heart began to beat faster as realization came upon him. There is no way to get out of this place alive. But he was not scared. In fact, his mouth was turned up in a smile. What he decided he needed to be above in his new life, he had already accepted the risk and danger that came with it. Now I have to find a way to get out of the situation without harming myself. He looked out and did a head count of the knights. There were 4 of them, and he suspected they were in the second stage of the advancement stage of a soulbearer, the Sinker Sulinked, where one would already have an aspect of their beast. There is absolutely no way for me, as a force user, to kill a soulbearer. The difference in strength is just too much. Then how? Vacuse's eyes turned inward as he began to think of every scrap of knowledge he knew. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and he released a long breath. The long breath came out with a subtle flow of force energy so faint that nobody noticed it. Vacuse could say confidently that there were few in the whole world who could match his manipulation of the force energy, especially in the subtle way. His force filled the small carriage, and like small threads, it began to drill into the bodies of the other candidates. Vacuse sighed softly, then closed his eyes and leaned back on his seat. To all of them, he appeared as if he was sleeping, but inwardly. Vacuse was on his toes like a person walking on a thin rope. His head was active. To inject one's energy into another person without them knowing is a skill that even Vacuse was always careful of using. And then using it on 8 people. His back was sweating, and it was with all his power that he kept his face from frowning in concentration. The carriage continued for a while at a steady pace, and then it suddenly sped up. It jolted Vacuse to open his eyes, and he stared outside with narrowed eyes. It is starting already, but I am not ready. The carriage suddenly whirled to the side and left the road, plunging into the forest. The other candidates also noticed the abnormalities, and they sat upright. What is going on? Why are we leaving the road? Is there a problem? None answered as they ran in the forest, narrowly missing smashing into trees, the monster horses growling and snarling wildly. Vacuse gritted his teeth. I need more time. Suddenly, the carriage slowed and then came to a stop. The door was opened, ripped free from the hinges with a force that almost took the rest of the wall with it in a shower of splinters. A knight stood at the door and sneered. Get out if you do not want to die. The candidates were startled for an instant before most of them began to shout in indignation. What the hell? We are under the Dragon Lord's protection. How dare you? The knight seemed bemused even though his eyes were cold, and he immediately set an example. His hand reached forward and gripped one of the candidates on the face, a boy who screamed and struggled. The knight pulled him out of the carriage as if he weighed nothing and lifted him up into the air. The other candidates could only watch in horrified expressions. As the hand of the knight glowed a slight green, a jet of green acid blasted out of his hand and into the boy's face. The boy screamed for 3 seconds before the acid melted through his flesh and bones into a fleshy mush, and he was dropped to the ground. Acid still dripped from the knight's hand and hissed as it touched the ground, blackening the earth and plants. The smell of burnt meat entered the carriage, and all the candidates swallowed. The knight said again, "Come down or die." They all came down so fast some of them tripped and fell, causing the knight to snicker. Only Vacuse remained in his carriage, and he had a troubled look on his face. Do you feel angry and sad on behalf of your fellow?" the knight asked with a cold smile. Power Stone. Chapter 20. Boy with the bet ears. Vacuse's frown deepened as he came out of the carriage. I am simply sad that I won't have the opportunity to apologize, but then again, you are the one that killed him. The knight stared at him with confused eyes, but he soon shrugged, his eyes turning cold, and he raised his hand that was filled with the deadly acid liquid to rub his chin. You are the only red-eyed bastard here. The other 3 knights came to join him, and they all stared at Vacuse. There was no smile or amusement in the way they looked at him, there was only hostility. Vacuse raised his hand, his face in a grimace. Is there something wrong with the carriage? Is that why you called us out? One of the knights looked down at the body on the ground, blood and fleshy mush still dripping into the leafy floor. Then he looked at Vacuse and snorted coldly. I heard you are a cold bastard, but I didn't think you would be like this. You Vorrakyn are always like this. We will take care of you soon enough. Vacuse's eyes sparkled with curiosity, and he asked softly, You will? Who? All the while, his heartbeat started to peak faster as he stared at the 4 knights, his web of force energy slowly intertwining with the candidates even tighter. A sneer. Won't you like to know? But then you'll be dead anyway. I can tell you, but then I'll have to kill all of you. After all, we need to keep some of you alive to send news back of the death of the bastard. Vacuse smiled bitterly. That's most gracious of you. But really, tell me why I need to die. At least, you owe me that much. One of the knights shrugged. You are showing some promise. Vacuse understood, and his brows pulled together slightly. In his past life, Zephyr was also attacked in the palace just days before the second rites, but they failed to kill him. But things had changed now. It was him that was getting attacked. So they don't want the Vorrakyn to rise. It will benefit them if the number of potential soulbearers who can bound a dragon appear. Even an A-ranked beast will slightly elevate the Vorrakyn family at this point. Vacuse smiled and pointed. One of your captives is trying to escape. One of the knights whipped his head backwards while the others kept their eyes on Vacuse, as if he was using the oldest trick in the book, distraction. But everyone, especially the candidate that was trying to run away, was shocked that Vacuse actually ratted him out. Wait, is this really a Vorrakyn? Why is he treating the subjects of his family like this? I told you the Vorrakyn are too ruthless. Have you heard the rumors of what they do with breeding more children? The lead knight gritted his teeth, his green hand flared even brighter, and more acid dripped into the ground. His gaze on Vacuse hardened. Kill the guy. The knight that was holding the candidate that tried to run gripped him by the neck and held him up. Vacuse's eyes twitched. Wait, don't kill him. Oh, I thought you are all ruthless and cold. You are nothing but a boy that's still wet behind the ears. You might have learned some tricks to keep your face calm, but I bet you are shitting yourself already. Vacuse looked at the knight holding the boy by the neck. Please don't kill him. I beg you. Don't kill Aiden. The knights grinned coldly and snorted at the helpless tone coming from him. But the other candidates revealed confused looks through the panic on their faces. Who the fuck is Aiden? There is no Aiden between them. The boy that was getting squeezed to death didn't have a name like that. Did Vacuse just make a name up from his head? Meanwhile, Vacuse began a countdown internally. "10,987. The lead knight's gaze sharpened, and he leaned closer. Tell us about Drenvar's plan. Tell us how he plans to fund the war he's provoking. Vacuse blinked. Drenvar is provoking a war. With who? 654. Stop this pretense, or I will kill all of your friends. Vacuse raised his hand. Wait, let me think. I might know something. 3-2. I told you. A kid that's not been tested by the world. I bet he already saw his life flash before his eyes. 1-0. Vacuse yawned. I was only joking. I don't know shit. The expression of the knight changed in an instant, and fury filled their faces. Crack. The candidates flinched as the neck of their friend was broken. Their gazes were filled with horror, and they shivered as the body hit the ground with a dull thud. Do you think we are joking here? A dangerous glint entered the knight's voice. Vacuse's eyes turned solemn, and he bowed. I know you are not. Then he raised his eyes to the candidates. If I was to rewind time, I still wouldn't have spent a minute of my time with you guys because it is not worth it. But know that I would have learned your name at least if I knew a day like this was coming. Anyway, thank you for your services to the great house of Vorrakyn. You will be remembered. Then he gave a short bow. Everyone showed confusion at Vacuse's words. What was he talking about? Is this guy a lunatic? But they soon understood. A rippling wave of force exploded out of Vacuse, blue light flaring out of him, showing the force energy around him and the web of blue light that was drilled into the bodies of the candidates. The knights turned to trace the lines, confusion on their faces. But Vacuse was already on the move. With his back against the carriage, it was easy for him to dart inside and out through the window. He whispered as he ran, forbidden technique.